Y'all, this is in direct opposition to the ways that the teachers of the law and the Pharisees of Jesus' time lived. You need to understand this text in context. So if you did what I asked you to and opened a Bible, you'll see it in let's go back to verse 39. No, let's go even further. Let's go to verse 38. It says, as he taught. Remember, this is right before what we've just read, okay? Are you tracking with me on this? Look at verse 38. As he taught, Jesus said, watch out for the teachers of the law. They like to walk around in flowing robes and be greeted with respect in the marketplaces. What they do for the praise and the applause of men. Just like those who had been giving that day, many of them, when they would give quite flamboyantly. They would give in a way that others heard the clink and the chink of the money as it went in to the container where it was contained. They did these things because they wanted it to be seen. Look at verse 39. They want to have the most important seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at banquets. And then look at verse 40. They devour widows' houses and for a show make lengthy prayers. These men will be punished most severely. I want you to look at verse 40 there. They devour widows' houses. What you need to understand, again in context, is that these kinds of people that were putting on a religious show, and that's what they were doing, some of the most vulnerable people in the ancient Near Middle East in the time that Christ walked the earth were widows. They were the most vulnerable people, some of the most vulnerable people. Because when their husband had passed away in that very, again, highly patriarchal society, right? They were on their own in so many ways. They were reliant on others. It's why if you've read the New Testament and you've read in the book of Acts, you see about provisions being made for widows. That happens. You've read about that. They were vulnerable. And what were these guys doing? They were taking advantage of widows, and we don't know exactly how, but very clearly, in some cases, even taking their homes. Their husbands died, and they would find a way to come in and get their property. Not only this, but this ilk of people, look, there have been people that have been abusing money for years and abusing money in the name of God for years. This is not new. May it never be me, may it never be you, but it's been happening for a long time. These teachers of the law and Pharisees were wanting everybody to think and believe that they kept the law perfectly. They always did everything right, and when people would look at them, they would say, oh, those guys are the guys that are on the pedestal. They're the ones that have got it all going on. Look at how holy they are. Look at how awesome the robes are. Look at all the money they throw in. But the things they would do on the side to get around it, like robbing widows, they would also do something called declaring their possessions Corban, C-O-R-B-A-N. And what it means is they had a responsibility based on the law, the Old Testament law. They had a responsibility to care for their parents, to provide for their aging parents so that they would have what they needed. But some of them were so greedy, their hearts were so dark, so black, so messed up. They had such little appreciation for what God had done for them. They would declare their possessions Corban, which means to say they are set apart for the Lord. Lord, all that I have is yours, and I'm declaring it basically holy. You know what a slap in the face that was to God? Because you know why they did this? They declared it Corban so that they didn't have to spend it on their own parents. They tried to get off on a technicality, and so that they then had no longer any responsibility to care for their loved ones. Money is not evil. Money is amoral. But what money and possessions will do, and Jesus knew this, it's why, y'all, over a third of the parables that Jesus teaches, are you listening? Over a third of the parables that Jesus teaches are about money or possessions.